Hi there, my name is Andrew Downard. I started my career as a research chemist, actually. My background is in chemistry, so not in supply chain at all, but very quickly fell into supply chain. I was doing the classic chemistry thing of adding A to B and making a new product. That turned out to be the easy part. The harder part was making it at scale and then getting it where it needed to go. And so I started spending a lot of time on that last part, moving the chemicals around the world, and that got me into supply chain. And since then, it's been a lot of other jobs and assignments around supply chain. Spent some time in sourcing, a lot of time in manufacturing, a little bit of time as an industry analyst, and I've been in supply chain leadership roles for several years now. I'm not sure the outside world understands how many supply chains still run on spreadsheets at best, and typed out emails at worst. Even very big, sophisticated companies still have these parts of their supply chains that run that way. It's been amazing for me to see that in places where you wouldn't really expect it. And those kinds of systems are okay when everything is running smoothly, but when it's not, it breaks down really, really quickly. I think there's a few things that are different in important ways about ketteQ. One is the data is visible and accessible. This is a question that I never asked 10 years ago. Where will our data be? Can we get it out? How will our data interact with other applications? And when you ask those questions today of some of the other solutions out there, the answers aren't great. You can't see your data, you don't understand what's happening to it, you might not even know where it is, and if you need it to interact with another application, which we often want to do, that's not an easy thing to accomplish. And it's not that those providers don't understand that need, it's just that it wasn't really a consideration when those products were being developed 20, 30 years ago. So I think that's a really important difference that ketteQ has, is the open nature of the architecture and the availability and the visibility of the data. That's something that's increasingly important. I know it is for me and places where we're doing deployments, and I think it is for others as well. There's a lot of talk these days about resilience or anti-fragility. Those are new terms for supply chain professionals. And I think they are really in reaction to the kinds of disruptions that we've been seeing, whether it's global political events, whether it's tariffs, even, quote, simpler things like we've had suppliers who have had fires in facilities. We are now seeing vendors decide to exit certain verticals, and they give us some notice, but they close, and maybe there's no alternative. And so within these supply chains, you see disruptions that are happening earlier they're happening earlier and earlier in the supply chains, but they're having an effect all the way downstream. And our customers are not particularly interested in hearing why we have disruptions. We can control our part of the supply chain, but we can't control the parts that are upstream of us. And so your only defense in that situation, and the situation seems to be getting worse and worse and worse, the only defense in that situation is to become as robust to the variation as possible. The advice I have is relatively unsexy. You need to spend a lot of time thinking about data. That's step number one. And this is not the sort of thing that a lot of magazine articles are written about these days. You don't see it in the New York Times. You see articles about supply chain disruptions, or you turn on Fox News and they're talking about tariffs. You see all that stuff makes the news. But in order to deal with that, you need to go all the way back to the beginning and make sure you have good data. And this is the least sexy advice in the world, but you have to spend a lot of time there. And then you need to make sure you have technology that makes good use of that data. Now, I know those are both very general statements, but that's the advice I consistently follow within our own company and give other companies. There are still a tremendous number of companies out there who don't have good data to work with and haven't chosen the right technology to leverage that data. And I'll give you a perfect example that's happening right now. Tariffs are going up and down rapidly. We didn't, and I suspect many companies found they didn't have tariff codes in their master data. And if you didn't, made it very hard to do rapid cycling analysis. So, you have to fix problems like that, and you have to do it proactively because you don't want to be behind when the disruption happens. And then you need to have the right technology available to you to make use of that. So to say, okay, Chinese tariffs are 145% today. What does that mean in terms of cost? What alternatives do I have? How rapidly can I replan? Not just next week and the week after that, but my CEO wants to know what the next year looks like at 145%, and my board wants to know what the next 3 years looks like at 145%. And then suddenly 145% is 35% or is 10%. And so you need to be able to rapidly cycle and understand how all of these different alternatives play out and what they mean for the business. I think a big shift over the last couple of years is supply chain regularly has a seat at the table because all of these things are happening. I haven't said AI yet in this conversation. And I don't want to feed into the AI hype too much, but supply chain planning solutions have historically required a high level of expertise from users, math, even coding in some cases, if nothing else, a lot of learning and experience. The idea that you can start to interact with these systems in natural language and not have to have a lot of specialized knowledge to get basic business questions answered, I think that has huge potential to be game-changing. One of the most important functions in supply chain planning is the commercial function. And it has always been the case that if a salesperson needs to know the answer to a simple question, what seems like a simple question, something like, how many units did we sell 2 years ago in this particular geography? Or, what do you think would happen? What has historically happened if we've taken the price down a little bit? What's happened to volume? These questions have been very difficult to answer in previous versions of technology in the supply chain planning space. Not impossible, but it took an expert and it took time. And you look at what ketteQ is doing now, those kinds of questions just can be asked and answered, not only by the supply chain person who's expert on the system, but by anyone, by a business leader, by a salesperson, by a marketer. The idea that those people, without any technical expertise, can interact with the system and the data, and it's going to be real time and give high quality results, I think that might be more transformative than anything else about the system. We tend to approach it, I tend to think about it as, how are my demand planners going to use it? How are my production planners going to use it? And that's, those use cases are super important. But I think as important as that is that a salesperson who's already living in Salesforce.com can just click over to the next tab and get their questions answered without a supply chain person being involved. That to me is as game-changing as anything kind of under the hood in terms of technology.